Welcome. Here we are on the eve of this big debate. I don't think there's ever been such a highly anticipated debate, like ever in presidential history. I'm a lot riding on this one, shall we say, for both sides. Anyway, on the eve of this debate, we get another poll that this time I think is really a shocker, because this is what you call an establishment poll. Ladies and gentlemen, wait until you see how it's affecting the prediction models. It is so good to have you here. I am Trish Regan. You can see I'm on the road doing the show, though, every day. You know it. I'm on the road. I actually just interviewed Vivek Ramaswamy. You know him, right? At a conference. And wow, I mean, he continues to impress me. He's a very, very smart guy who's thinking about things in a really, really smart way. Anyway, I wanted to make sure that I brought this news to you of this insane, amazing new poll. This just coming out. Here we go. New York Times. New York Times, for goodness sakes. New York Times here, ladies and gentlemen, saying that Trump and Harris are neck and neck. Well, technically he's ahead, but they're going to characterize it to help her however they can. Neck and neck after summer upheaval. This is the new New York Times Siena poll. Ahead of the debate, they write, the survey found that Donald Trump is retaining his support and voters are unsure they know enough about where Kamala Harris stands in order to vote for her. So when they asked the question, if you were going to vote today, if you were going to the voting booth today, who would you vote for? And in this national poll, Kamala Harris is coming in at 47% and Donald Trump is coming in at 48%. Incredible. Okay, so this is playing out then if you look at the Electoral College win probability showing in this prediction model that the New York Times Siena College has of a 99.7% Electoral College win. I mean, that is incredible. Again, this is neck and neck. I mean, if you have 48% versus her 47%, in theory, then you should win the Electoral College. But it's still, sort of hit or miss. And I say that only because there's a lot between now and then. And I sort of wonder, this is a live show, so curious to get your thoughts on it. Remember to subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. But I wonder if he kills it tomorrow night, like if he's restrained and he's exactly, a lot of people don't like to see him restrained, but I think in this environment, less is more, because the policy, frankly, and the history of his policy is on his side. So if he's able to really pull off what the mainstream media would characterize as a win, what happens then? Because when you look at these prediction models, guys, this is insane. I want to show you right now what Nate Silver just updated his prediction model to show. Well, first of all, he's like, oh my gosh, on the New York Times Siena poll. Like, that actually changed a lot of his calculations, so much so that this morning he was out with, take a look there, this morning he was out with 63.8% chance of Donald Trump winning the Electoral College versus 36% Harris. And then this afternoon, the poll prediction model changed again, actually bumping Trump up even higher, 64.4% to 35.3%. I mean, this is kind of amazing. I can't underscore this enough. Now, you didn't see a ton of coverage about this New York Times Siena poll over the weekend, right? Did you? On the weekend shows? This is not really fitting with the narrative, and they want to give her one last chance, right? So unfortunately for her, and I'm just being practical, right? I'm just being absolutely forthcoming here. Unfortunately for her, because she hasn't had enough experience on the campaign trail, she hasn't had enough adversaries in the media shooting questions at her, she runs the risk of there being just too much pressure on this event. Don't forget, she's been holed up in that hotel in Pennsylvania trying to work on her script, so to speak. And the script is the script, right? How many times do we have to hear, well, I'm turning a new page. Okay, Kamala, the problem is, for 3.5 years, you've been on that page, right? So people don't really buy it when you say, I'm going to turn a new page. Unfortunately, again, for her, she's tethered to the wrong guy with the wrong policies. Of course, his policies look kind of quaint compared to some of the things she said, mind you. Anyway, take a look here at what the Daily Mail is now predicting. They are saying that he's got a 55% chance of becoming president. This is a 4.5% point boost since last week. And their model basically works where they're crunching all the national and state data, and they're feeding this into this model. These are like, how do I say this? The reason these algorithms are interesting, certainly to me, but they should be to you as well, is it's really kind of looking at it almost like a trader would, right, on Wall Street, where you have algorithms that are trying to mirror out all these different scenarios. Okay, 8,000 different ways that this could go, and what do we think the probability is of him winning the Electoral College versus Harris winning the Electoral College. So that's what they're crunching here. And again, anything can shift on a dime. And depending on what happens tomorrow night, we may see those kinds of shifts start to take place. But what Nate would point out in his model, and let me see if I have the latest, this is actually fantastic. If you look at the graphic of this, I'm going to try and put this up for you guys because it's actually wild. I mean, again, 64.4% chance that he's going to win it. And this is, it's like it just, the momentum keeps coming and coming and coming. And I don't believe in sort of counting your chickens before they hatch, and I just to be totally forthcoming. I mean, I'm a big fan of the policies, especially vis-a-vis the alternative. But here's this poll I want to show you. So look at this. Again, 64.4% versus 35.3%. But what's amazing there is you see that divide, right? You see Trump going one direction, you see Harris going another direction. And that's pretty remarkable. I mean, I just find that really, really incredible. Let me put it over the Daily Mail prediction model here. So they've got a 55% chance. Nate Silver is actually modeling out a 64.4% chance. This is fascinating. It's a little bit, dare I say, when you look at the New York Times poll that came out, it's a little bit of Nate's like I told you so, because he's been saying all along that you have to factor into the prediction model issues like the lack of the bounce coming out of the DNC, issues like the lack of enthusiasm for her in Pennsylvania. And that's actually, all of this has led him to really be pretty, I think, optimistic for Trump, pessimistic for Kamala Harris. I mean, he does say that this is an especially important poll, the New York Times Siena, because it's, quote, this is from his newsletter, our second highest rated pollster. So they're to be trusted in his estimation. So he says, quote, there's a real lesson here in the dangers of poll cherry picking. Democrat partisans have been blowing up my mentions, complaining about which polls are included in the silver bullet polling averages. And usually that stuff comes out in the wash through things like the model's house effects adjustment, which is calibrated mostly based on the more reliable surveys. And now he says one of the best pollsters in the country is coming forward with some very bad news for Kamala Harris. He also points out that the New York Times Siena poll is worthwhile because it has a very large sample size, 1,695 likely voters, and also the poll is extremely recent. It follows the post-Labor Day weekend, and it's therefore field work that's very fresh. Very fresh. It was just completed on Friday, and he's saying, like, I'm trying not to say I told you so. I'll try not to say I told you so. I told you so, but I told you so, right? I mean, look, it is hard to figure out some of these polls when it comes to Donald Trump, in part because not everybody's entirely forthcoming. And so I think the prediction models are actually very effective in trying to measure some of these other less tangible things that might affect where people are actually going to vote. He writes also that the poll provides trend lines for comparison, that the numbers are just a bit worse for Harris than the previous New York Times Siena National Survey in July, and considerably worse for her, quote, than in a series of battleground state polls the Times conducted in early August. And last, he says, this New York Times Siena poll tends to drive the media conversation about the race, given the poll's well-deserved reputation for accuracy. Now, the only problem with that is no one in the mainstream media is actually covering the New York Times Siena. But interesting how that works, don't you think? I mean, fascinating how, the bad news just for them gets it totally ignored. They'd be wise to pay attention to this, though. Nate goes on to say the problem for Harris is that Donald Trump has been gaining on her in our polling averages, he writes, at least in the most important electoral college states. If, say, Harris had gained 1 point when the conventional bounce adjustment was expecting her to gain 2 points, then it would look more like a rounding error in the model. Instead, though, she's actually losing ground since the start of the convention in swing polls, which is why why this debate has so much riding on it. This debate is so crucial, is so important. Listen, a quick shout out for my financial research newsletter company. Listen, if you are not subscribed to this, I want you to do that. You can do it. Actually, you can do it for free if you just go and sign up for the email. But if you want to get the good stuff, if you want to get the 76 report, use code word dollar, DOLLAR, code word dollar, and it's just $1 a month. Hence the code word dollar to start. $1 a month for the first 2 months, then it goes to $9.95. But look, you need to invest. Like, if there's one thing you need to do. What happened with the market today? How do you like that? What did I say on Friday? It was a good time to get in with everything going lower, lower, lower. I do believe that ultimately the Federal Reserve is going to be there. I'm not your investment advisor, but I tend to have a pretty good sixth sense on these things. And yes, of course, the Dow is up back over 40,000, 1.2%. S&P 500 trading up 1.1 on the day, and the NASDAQ also higher. Listen, you need to be invested for the long term. It's part of doing business, shall I say. You want to be in the game, and there's a certain risk, I think, if you're not. And again, everybody has their own risk tolerance, but for those of you that are looking for names that you can invest in and hope to see some return over the long term, we have 3 model portfolios. There's the American Resilience portfolio that's kind of growth oriented. There is Apple came out, by the way, new Apple 16, lots of colors. So that's one of the portfolios. We also have the inflation protection portfolio because inflation's coming. And then we also have the income builder portfolio. I've shown you some of the graphics on the income builder portfolio because that's been up considerably vis-a-vis in the last 3 months, ending at the end of August vis-a-vis what the S&P has done. So there's a lot of opportunity here for those of you that are interested. Again, go to 76research.com. There's a ton of fear out there. I think that the Democrats are really, really worried right about now. And you know what? They should be. They should be worried because they've got a candidate that America is really not buying in on. I mean, look, let's face it. Joe Biden was too old for the job. People noticed. That's why he's not there. But it wasn't just his age. I think they would have forgiven that to a certain extent if he had had amazing policies. But people look at the policies and they're like, wait a second, this isn't really working for me. My groceries are way up. My gas is way up. I'm not making as much. And so consequently, they were dissatisfied with Biden. Well, why do we think that's all going to change? When you wave a magic wand and you say, we're going to put Kamala in the seat instead, how is it going to change what's really going on at home? It doesn't. And so consequently, Democrats right now are really, really scared because they have somebody in the seat, Kamala Harris, who has, frankly, the same track record as Joe Biden and doesn't really have the je ne sais quoi on the debate stage, nor frankly the policy chops to be able to pull this off. And they know it. And there's a big article in Friday's Axios. This is amazing. I'm going to quote from it. They did an interview with some of the Biden advisors who had been a little frustrated with Harris's performance as vice president, and they have 3 big concerns. They say it falls into 3 buckets. Guys, this is really remarkable, especially when you hear number 2. That's the one that just blows me away. Anyway, number 1, they found her public performances uneven and often not reassuring. This improved over time, but even recently, several of Biden's team members worried she'd struggle under the glare of national pressure. So I guess this is why she's not doing any interviews. I guess this is why there's no press conferences. I guess this is why everything is all scripted out. But it's not just that. It's not just me guessing. I think it is scripted out for good reason, because if you go to number 2, guess what? Boom. Quote, they found her risk adverse to the point of paralysis. The issue she embraced most, abortion rights, is one with the least risk, as polls show Democrats with a huge advantage on that issue. Okay, so the only issue she's going back to is the abortion thing, but she's paralyzed, apparently, on everything else. If you're risk adverse to the point of paralysis, I don't really think you should be the president of the United States. Frankly, I don't think you should be vice president. But frankly, I don't think you should be senator. Frankly, I don't think you belong in politics, period. Okay? You cannot be risk adverse to the point of paralysis, because not doing anything at all is the same exact thing as making the worst decision. I mean, hey, at least if you make the worst decision, you made a decision. But this woman actually can't make a decision. And then the other thing that they noticed, which I've talked to you about, is her turn turnover in the staff rate. Check this out. Quote, they worried, number 3, about the high turnover rate among her staff. Of the 47 Harris staffers who publicly disclosed to the Senate in 2021, only 5 still work for her. As of this spring. That's incredible. This tally is incomplete because roughly half the staff isn't even listed on the Senate disclosures. All right. Oh, wow. So she can't hold on to her employees. She can't hold on to her staff. What does that tell you about her? Think about it. I mean, she's clearly not easy or nice to work for. I heard that you had to stand in the room whenever she came in. When she walks into the room, you have to stand up. She's kind of all on ceremony, but very little on substance. If again, you look at the Axios piece, it's really rather shocking. They talk about 9 areas in which she shifted views on her current position, or it's just not known what her current position is. So you get the banning plastic straws, you get that mandate for automakers that, they got to be totally EV by 2035. Apparently, according to Axios, they've asked and asked and asked, and the campaign won't say whether she is still for it or not, because you see, it's kind of not a winning issue, especially when the companies themselves are backing out. We've seen that from a couple of them recently, Ford and Toyota. They're like, okay, this isn't really for us. We're going to do the hybrid model instead. 3, banning fracking because of concerns over global warming and potential water contamination. Well, now that's no longer the case. Okay, now she's no longer in favor of banning fracking altogether because you see she needs to win Pennsylvania. I'm telling you, she should have just gone with Josh Shapiro. She would have had a heck of a better shot. Number 4, mandatory buyback program for assault weapons. Apparently that's no longer something that she's in favor of. She's dropped that idea. 5 is decriminalizing crossing the border from a criminal offense to a civil one. She no longer supports that. Reparations for slavery. Her position on that one is unclear, but it's kind of a no-win thing. They've been battling that in California. Number 7, building a wall on the southwest border, a defining Trump promise that many Democrats have fought. She accepted it as part of the bipartisan border package that Republicans killed. And then, of course, we know she's been promoting it in her commercials. CNN had to admit that's actually a Trump wall that she keeps showing in the commercials. 8, a federal jobs guarantee. Wow. A federal jobs guarantee that was part of her Green New Deal. She's no longer for that. I mean, who is this woman, ladies and gentlemen? Who is this woman? I think it's a fair question for us to be asking right about now. And then Medicare for All, which Harris embraced in her first year as senator. She's backed off of that. I mean, gosh, no wonder she doesn't want to do any interviews, at least in Donald Trump's favor, right? He basically has kind of had one position and one position only for a long time, like a very, very long time. So yes, they're freaking out. They're really scared. She's not going to be able to do it, that she's not prepared, and that's going to be a disaster. I mean, listen, you got to be prepared. You can't go into this and not know your policy or not know where you stand on various issues, because Donald Trump is going to just chew you up and spit you out pretty darn fast. He knows where he stands. Jim Messina, who ran Obama's campaign, was asked about this recently, and Ian Sams, who runs Kamala's campaign, was also asked about this recently on Fox. I want you to take a listen to what they're saying. Messina's making the point that she's lost a lot of the core constituency that was favoring Joe Biden, a lot of older white voters in the middle of the country. It's something Nate Silver has picked up on as well. And while she definitely has picked up a new crowd, so to speak, if you lose the old ones, you don't have much. Here he is.
Was on our show yesterday. Pennsylvania, important state. Obviously, you got to have that in your column if you want to get to 270. This is what he said about vulnerabilities for the Harris campaign with older white voters, and we were talking in particular about those retirees. Watch.
Part of her struggle right now is these older white voters, where Joe Biden was doing better than she is right now. So she's got to address this, and she did yesterday in her announcement. But you're on to one of the challenges of the election for her, which is these older white voters that love Joe Biden and are still waiting to figure out what to do in this election.
And they haven't heard from her. And I know that she did the speech in New Hampshire, but the President Trump, for all the interviews that he's done, he's willing to take questions, everything. Is it a risk to put all your chips on one debate when she hasn't really been able to do any sort of Q&A with anybody except for in debate prep?
Well, I reject that. She sat down with Dana Bash for a long interview on CNN that aired.
One interview in 47 days.
For a whopping 16 minutes.
You know, I know you guys are just now paying attention to her now that she's the presidential candidate, but she's done about 90 interviews this year as the vice president, and people maybe weren't paying attention or listening. She's taken questions from reporters on the campaign trail so far in this campaign, people who are covering her every single day. She's going to do more interviews and talk to the press more and take more reporter questions. Of course she's going to do that.
Good for Dana for calling him out. Look, he's trying to spin this, but the American people are like, yeah, we haven't heard from her other than a few canned speeches on the campaign trail. And when I say canned, I mean canned. Take a look.
It's good to be back in Pennsylvania. It really is good to be back in Wisconsin. It is so good to be back in Michigan. I am clear. The path to the White House runs right through this state. And listen, I am clear. The path to the White House runs right through this state. I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I know Donald Trump's type. I know Donald Trump's type.
Ooh, and I haven't even gotten, ladies and gentlemen, I have not even gotten, hang on, let's make sure, yeah, we got our microphone on. I've not even gotten to the, you gotta thank a union member bit, right? Remember that? When she did the speech up north, it was one accent, and then she went to Detroit, and she's in the middle of the country. She kind of developed this like southern drawl. You gotta thank a union member. I mean, who is Kamala Harris other than a prompter reader? You know what? I don't even read a prompter on this show. There is no prompter. There is no script. We're just going, okay? Like maybe she should do this and kind of pick up a few tips about how to speak along the way. The problem, unfortunately for her as well, is the fact that, you know, she's been there for 3.5 years. Been there, seen that, done that. And this is something that the New York Times is right to point out. Harris's debate challenge, pushing ahead without leaving Biden behind. That is the headline today. And they're right. I mean, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And this is exactly why they should have primaried the guy way back when. You know what? They should have actually put up a good old-fashioned race, and then you would have had a winner that would have said, hey, you know what, I'm not going to do what Biden did, and I'm not going to do what Trump's going to do. I am my own person. Instead they orchestrated this. You got to admit. I mean, I'm sorry, but I think it was like an option, right? They had some optionality. They threw him to the wolves there in the debate, and they're like, okay, if you can manage this, Biden, you're going to stay in. And if you can't, and if you fall flat on your you know what, then, well, we're going to take over. And they took over indeed. They put her in. But now you just have repetition of the same. And if America actually does want change, and I think they do, then you're not going to vote for the exact same person that got you in this mess to begin with. Here's CNN being forced to admit, poor CNN, being forced to admit that, you know, people do actually care about a few central issues, specifically the economy. Go back to Carville. It's the economy, stupid. Here we go. CNN.
What is clear, top of mind for voters in this election is the economy, and specifically in these states, roughly 8 in 10, just a shade over 8 in 10, say that the economy is a major issue in deciding their vote. Inflation also continues to be a major concern. Voters clearly feeling uneasy. A majority, more than a quarter of registered voters in each of these 3 states say that their income is not keeping up with inflation. You can imagine both candidates will be asked about this tomorrow night. Brianna?
Okay, and I don't really think Kamala's going to have the answers other than she's going to give out more handouts. Well, guess what that's going to do? It's going to cause more inflation. What do you think the Inflation Reduction Act did? I mean, when you print that much money and Congress just, you know, gives out that much money, you're going to cause more inflation. And that's exactly what she's talking about, right? She wants to wave a magic wand and forgive everybody's student loans. Great. So education costs are going to go up even more. And the value of our dollars are going to go down even more. And then there's let's just give everybody $25,000 for their brand new home. First-time home buyers, step up to the plate. Well, you are going to increase the price, literally, at least by $25,000 of all those starter homes. I mean, this woman has no clue on how to fix any of this, except maybe from a socialist perspective. I mean, for goodness sakes, they let her out briefly a couple of weeks ago, and she let it slip. She let it slip. She's like, we're going to fix it. Basically, communist style, because she believes in the collective. Listen.
We believe in the collective. We're not falling for these folks who are trying to divide us, trying to separate us.
No, because we believe in the collective. Those are the operative words there, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the collective is not going to pay the bills. The collective is going to help drive inflation even higher. And by the way, the collective has been in business there for the last 3.5 years with all of their handouts. And what has it done? It's created more inflation. Wages aren't keeping up. Everyday Americans know that. So she's got a lot to come forward with in this big debate. She's got a lot riding on it. And of course, she could actually help herself a little bit by maybe getting out there and doing some media interviews, maybe by doing some press conferences. But don't forget, she's completely risk averse to the point of paralysis, per the Axios source. So now the White House has a new spin on why she's not actually doing any interviews. Gina Raimondo, who runs the Commerce Department and is, well, I don't know if she's not bright, but she's certainly not up on the actual news curve, because remember in the Labor Department, it was the Commerce Secretary, mind you, reported that, they were off by some 800,000 jobs in the number of jobs being created in the last year. Well, Gina Raimondo, the brilliant rocket scientist of a Commerce Secretary we have, actually was like, no, that's like Trump lies. Like, no, lady, it's your own darn Labor Department. So I just mentioned that because she's not exactly the brightest bulb. She doesn't really keep up with the news cycle. And she has some new reason as to why Kamala Harris is not actually doing any interviews. I'll tell you, it's great. CNBC, Joe Kernan, he called her out on it right to her face. Watch.
Yeah, I know you're a surrogate. But the American people are frustrated, the media is frustrated at the amount of access anyone's gotten to her for the past 41 days. I know you've seen that. We're finally going to have a debate tomorrow night, but she sat down for one interview that was taped and then cut down, and certain little things came out from it. But it has been a master class in avoiding any questions, and nothing's been made clear by her. Maybe it's been made clear in dribs and drabs from her policymakers when it comes out in print or on off a teleprompter at one of her scripted speeches. She's been impossible to pin down on anything because she hasn't given any access. The American people deserve it. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, and I hear you, but I respectfully disagree. This is a presidential election like no other. She only has a few weeks to do everything, and she's spending her time talking to Americans. She has a punishing schedule, out and about, everywhere, being with the people who she wants to elect her.
Okay, I don't think that's entirely correct, Gina. Yet again, you're a little behind the news curve. She's actually been holed up in a hotel in Pennsylvania, and the few times she's come out, she's totally dissed reporters. For example, like this one, who just dared to ask, hey, how's the debate prep going? I'm guessing not well.
How's debate prep? Madam Vice President, how is debate prep going?
Kamala ignores her, totally ignores her, just walks up the stairs of Air Force One. I mean, hey, she looks pretty good. She's got good posture walking up those stairs on Air Force One, which is saying something because, we haven't always seen that. But no, how can, again, Go back to the lack of policy. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, you like, all that good stuff. Anyway, I'm showing a screen grab from the Kamala Harris for President website. There's no policy on it. No. You can take action. You can go to the store or you can donate. Gee, wow. You know what? Great. You're running for president late. Hey, by the way, I'm not running for president. I'm not running for president, but I've got a store too. I'll show you the link to that. Actually, we have it in the show notes. You can go to trishregan.shop. But here's some people who do actually have a clue on policy, and that would be the folks over at Heritage. They've got Project 2025. You can learn the truth about Project 2025 today. Just go to www.25truth.com. They're actually talking policy. And I think it's pretty good. I mean, I read through all the pillars of it. They're talking about education, the need to have a meritocracy for education and opportunity in education, which means maybe not just buying whatever the teachers union is selling. Thank you very much. So that's one of the things that they're talking about, energy and how you need all kinds of energy. We need as much energy as we can get. I'll sign up for that. Thank you very much. From an economic perspective and from a national security perspective, you can read more. It's not a hidden thing like the left wants you to believe. It's actually right out there in the open. Go to 25truth.com. Anyway, Kamala is working hard on trying to learn her policy, but she doesn't even know what her policy is. Let's face it, she's all over the place. Per the Axios article, those 9 different things that she's been flip-flopping on. Donald Trump, he's going to be a force. Here he is talking about Kamala Harris. Watch.
Well, she's a woman. She represents certain groups of people. But I will say this. When people find out about her, I think she'll be much less. I see it right now. I see her going way down in the polls now. Now that people are finding out that she destroyed San Francisco, she destroyed the state of California along with Governor Gavin Newsom. He's been a terrible governor, terrible. But they did it together. And she was early. I mean, she was the first of the prosecutors, really. You know, now you see Philadelphia, you see Los Angeles, you see New York, you see various people that are very bad. But she was the first of the bad prosecutors. She was early. Oh, it's going to end. The honeymoon period's going to end. Look, she's got a little period. She's got a convention coming up. It's about policy. It's not about her. I think she's incompetent. Because I've watched her. She destroyed California. She destroyed San Francisco. Everything she's touched has turned to bad things. I'm not going to use foul language. But everything she's touched has turned bad. She's incompetent. The reason she's not doing what I do, and she's not doing what she should be doing, she won't even do interviews with friendly people. Because she can't do better than Biden. Now, he had a reason for not doing well. And he was never, 25 years ago, the sharpest or brightest bulb in the ceiling. That I can tell you, okay? He wasn't. But he could do interviews at least. Not lately, he couldn't, perhaps. But she should be doing interviews. She doesn't want to do interviews. And the reason she doesn't is, number one, her policies are so bad. Just to answer your question, I think that it's not going to change because it's really ultimately not about her as much as about her policies. She wants open borders. She wants to defund the police. She wants to defund the police. She wants to take away your guns. Anybody that thinks they're not going to come after your guns.
So that was Donald Trump. That's actually from a couple of weeks ago, right before the DNC. And he kind of laid it out there. You know, her policies are not in sync with where most of America is right now. And look, she's got 3.5 years under her belt, and the policies haven't worked. She was borders are. And we've got the biggest problem at the border we've thus far seen. Here he is again talking about that.
Did you see her the other night? They put a camera in her face. She can't even talk. We just went through 4 years. Let's not go through another.
This is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy and strengthening alliances. This is incredible.
Oh my gosh. You know what, guys? Like this debate is going to be awesome. Because we need to all watch it. And I need to come on with you like live after this tomorrow night. I know it's going to be late and everything, but we need to talk about it because I don't think, I mean, I could be wrong. We'll see how much caffeine she has, right? We'll see how she does. I don't think that she is firing on enough cylinders to be articulate enough when she's under pressure. And I say that in part, like, this is a woman who, well, 3.5 years of lousiness, but you also have to consider she didn't pass the bar exam the first time she tried. I mean, I think that's something, right? You go to law school, you sign up for the exam, she didn't pass it. And like somehow she's kind of weirdly proud of that. Oh, I didn't pass it. I wouldn't be so proud of that lady. She went to an okay law school. I mean, it's like number 88. And, she's up against Trump, who has had many years as a businessman and went to UPenn, undergrad and business school. Now, I know some people say, oh, his daddy got him in, whatever. Maybe not. I'm just saying, like, go back to wages. During the Trump administration, you had 4 years of actually the best wage growth we've seen from median income earners ever, adjusted for inflation. Like, you got to go, well, not ever. You got to go back to the 1950s, actually, probably to JFK, late 50s, to be able to see anything like it. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, has actually presided over an economic team, a border team, an international team, a State Department that has gotten us seemingly into more conflicts overseas. I mean, Afghanistan and that withdrawal was a disaster. She said she was the last person in the room. I'm sorry, her words, not mine. She was the last person in the room. Okay, well then own it. You screwed up, royally screwed up. So there's that. There's the economy, and there's the border. Those are kind of three big central things, and I don't know how she spins it. Like, I really don't know how she's going to spin, oh, we're going to turn the page, and have a whole new lifeline. No one's buying it, Kamala. No one's buying it. Hey, if you were just watching this, we are live, and I want you to subscribe to the show. You know, that way when I'm here live every single day, I'm seeing so many new people, actually. It's really interesting. Hey, Don, good to see you. Look at this. I'm gonna type, and I'm gonna talk at the same time. See, I did it. I just wanted to say hi. I missed the hi part. Anyway, I'm looking at the live chat on YouTube, and it's so good to have all you guys here. I think we need to be vigilant and cautious, though, right about now, because there's a good chance that he kills it. He does great, right? Like he performs. He's restrained. He has to be a little bit more restrained, in part because I'm just going to say this: she's a woman. And I said this going into the Hillary Clinton debates. He was magnificent in the debates with Hillary Clinton, in part because he actually took that advice that people were giving. Listen, she's a woman. You need to be a little bit more gentle. Part of the reason why I think his debate with Biden back in 2020 didn't go so well was because, he's like, okay, the gloves are off. He's a guy. I can go for it. And he went for the jugular in 2020, and it didn't come off well. It's one of the reasons I said going into the debate with Biden, he had to be mindful of the fact that Biden now feels very fragile and very old. Well, there's a similar dynamic in that she's a woman, so you can't be as aggressive. You can't totally go for the jugular. You have to be very restrained, I think, and he can do that. Like, he can. We'll see if he does. Look, it's him, and we'll see what he's fancying that evening. But I think he can do it. I think for her, she just doesn't have the policy chops or the track record to be able to pull this off. So what happens then? Serious question. What happens then? So if he excels, and I expect him to, and she falls flat on her face, what do they do? I mean, you've already seen Nate Silver's prediction poll. He keeps saying there's just no way. I mean, he was one of the first ones to come out and say, listen, guys, you got to think about other options here, because it's risky not to run Biden, but it's risky to run him. Well, here we are running Harris at the top of the Democrat ticket with Waltzy Boy, who is a whole other separate story. Again, she should have picked Josh Shapiro. But I suspect she was worried about what everybody would say in Michigan, because she's got too many people that are very against Israel, and consequently she's trying to appease that base. On top of it, the word on the street is that she didn't like how Shapiro kind of commanded the room and sucked all the oxygen out of the room, thereby making her feel more diminutive. But you got Trump at 64.4% in his prediction poll, and he's pretty good. Like, he's not exactly I mean, if I were going to classify him as anything, I'd classify him more on the left than on the right. But I think as a statistician, he's trying to do his best job to be as transparent as possible. And he's saying, there it is, 35.3% chance of Harris winning, 64.4%, in part because of none other than that New York Times poll, where Donald Trump is leading now. And he's pointing to all of the swing states. He's pointing to the fact that she hasn't won a Pennsylvania poll. He's pointing to the fact that she doesn't have momentum on her side. And I mean, she really doesn't. Look at that momentum. I'm just blown away by this graphic, because that V is now further apart. Look at that. It's a bigger V than what we had before they knocked off Biden from the ticket, that is. Okay? So the spread is even more significant. So where does that leave Kamala? I think it leaves her in a very bad spot, and they can't change their candidate now. So what do they do? I'm just going to throw this out there. Do you think, with being mindful of not being too, we don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but maybe they, a couple weeks before the election, make some kind of decision to, I don't know, take Joe Biden and put him out to pasture, right? Could he retire? And she takes over, and then she's there and she does an Oval Office speech, and she's walking up and down the stairs on Air Force One, and everybody's like, wow, they could. But I'll remind you, what does that get you? I mean, maybe America says, oh wow, yeah, she's the president already. But what does it get you? Because if you actually want change and you want to shift away from the misery that you've been dealing with for the last 3.5 years, if Kamala Harris were to take over as president, wouldn't that just dig her in even deeper? I mean, think about it, guys. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but I think that they're really feeling as though their backs are up against the wall. The other thing is you got to keep in mind there's a lot of mail-in ballots. Those are going to come in. They're very, to their credit, the Democrats are very good at that mail-in thing, right? They get a good ground game going on. So consequently, where does that put us? Peace of Mind, actually, one of our frequent viewers here, I'm just looking at the chat as I speak to you in real time, makes a very good point that maybe Joe Biden needs to stay on with enough time so that he can pardon his son, the presidential pardons that happen. I'm betting, Peace of Mind, I'm just betting that if they do a deal like this, and I'm just saying, look, I'm not saying this is going to happen by any stretch. I mean, we're just looking at options, right? Like, if I'm a Democrat, I'm freaking out right about now. I'm like, oh my gosh, if she fails in this poll, what do we do now? So we're just looking at all the options. One of the options might be to say, okay, Joe, it's time to retire. Well, if they do that, I imagine that there's going to be some kind of backroom deal that's going on so that it would protect his son in some way, shape, or form, because I think they would want to do that. Again, I'm looking at all of your comments, and yes, I would agree. Guys, we need a strong debate. Donald Trump has to be on his A game. He has to be cautious and careful and treat her a little bit with kid gloves. I know the guy is a good guy that's moderating the debate, but he's ABC News, so he's Disney owned. He's a lefty like any other of the network news anchors. And so we'll be watching David Muir carefully to see, again, whether he's able to really be fair. I think it will be pretty much down the middle. The fact that there are not going to be open microphones, that does actually work to Trump's advantage, because he has a tendency to jump in, and you don't want to save her from herself. She's got to actually speak for 2 solid minutes without using all the colloquial expressions that she defaults to. We don't need to hear about the passage of time, for example. I mean, if we hear that, that's a good, once again, sort of crutch that she would go back to, and what's going on. So the fact that the microphones are not going to be open means she's actually going to sustain herself, much like Joe Biden was supposed to and couldn't for the allotted amount of time. So I think that's a positive. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. Again, I'm on the road, as you can see. I just did a great interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, who, wow, is just a really smart guy. We need more people in politics like that. He has a financial background, a biotech background, obviously brilliant guy, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law, went to Harvard Law actually with J.D. Vance. They were just like a year apart, and weirdly, J.D. lives like 15 minutes from him, he was telling me, in Ohio. So I mean, wow, go Ohio, right? Oh my goodness. Anyway, it was just very, very interesting talking to him. We were talking about a lot of things, including the future of biotech, the future of crypto, the future of education. I mean, we need, as a nation, to just get smarter. We need more ideas. It's one of the things I liked about listening to Trump's economic Club of New York speech the other day, because whether you agree with it or not, whether you agree that a sovereign wealth fund would work in our country, at least he's talking about stuff, right? Like, at least we're putting things on the table and we're having these discussions, and I think it's super important that we do. So again, I just want to say, hey, thanks to everyone. Mr. Junebug, thank you so much. This is just what you call really natural lighting. I'm just using my laptop computer, and I just have a little teeny, one of these ring lights right up in front of me. So thank you for the compliments. I so appreciate it. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, thank you for that. Do me a favor, come over to our YouTube channel, because we're here live every single day. For those that are just joining us, as I said, I saw so many new names. Thank you. Jeb, thank you for the great show comment. Do make sure that you subscribe. It's really, really, really important. I'm here every day, and I'm here only because I feel that it's important to be here, and I don't want to go be working for some big network where, somebody's micromanaging me, and I do have to have scripts, and everything is so, orchestrated. The advantage we have here, and I'm able to do this because of all these technological changes. It's really incredible. It's so massive. I'm able to do this because of the tech changes and because of all of you, because, I'm building it. As they say, build it and they will come. Well, that's exactly what's happened. We're up to 355,000 subs. Thank you so much for that. Some of you have been here from the very, very beginning. And, Leslie, I know she's always like, hey, in the beginning, she'd be like, your microphone's not working. So in the beginning, it was really, really rough. So thank you to all of you who have been here. Don, you've been such a loyal fan of the show as well. For those of you that are interested in investing, I'm telling you, you've got to get my 76 research. Go to 76research.com. Sign up for the 76 report. Use code word dollar. If you're really into this, your best value option is actually to sign up for the Founders Club. The Founders Club gives you access to all the model portfolios plus the 76 report. I teamed up with a very dear longtime friend named Rob Horton, who spent decades on Wall Street running billions of dollars. And when he was retiring, I'm like, oh, I got something for you. I would love to do this. I had dreamed of doing this actually for so many years, because I know so many people that are like, I need help, like understanding, where do I invest? What do I invest in? Now, I'm not your advisor. We're not running your money. We don't touch your money. This is just our thoughts on the overall landscape right now, as well as the companies that we think are positioned for the future. So go check us out, 76research.com. Sign up for the 76 report with code word dollar. It's just $1 for the first 2 months, $9.95 thereafter. It's going to be the best $9.95 I think you'll have ever spent. Look, I try not to ever steer you wrong. Markets go up, markets go down. You can read the disclaimer. But the reality is, I really do care about making sure more people have access to our capital markets, because in the capital labor equation, you know what? Labor's missing out. If you have a 401k, great. If you have a pension, great. But do what you can on the side as well. It's not that hard. You can get a brokerage. You can trade for free, basically. So that's my soapbox for today. I'm looking forward to this debate. I can't wait to see it. I want to comment on it with you. So we will resume this show, of course, tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you then.